good to be with the guys tonight. Some of you all don't know, on Thursday mornings, I'm the only man in a class of women. And that's a special time, though. There's some good Bible students, but I always love it when we can be together as men, thinking about the lives of Christian men. And it's really good to have the posse right up here on the front. Always. We're going to be studying from a book that I think it's the most suspenseful in all the Bible. If you're just reading the Bible as literature and you had never read it before, you come to the book of Esther, and it's going to read really, really good. We don't have time to think about all of it tonight, but we in the class in here are going to zero in on Mordecai, one of the main characters in the book. Let's start in Esther chapter 2. Esther chapter 2, we're going to read a little bit, and in a little while we're going to be interactive. I'll be asking some questions, and we'll appreciate if you'll participate in the discussion then. It'll make everything better. Esther chapter 2, let's start reading in verse 5. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So when the king's order and his edict were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa, the citadel, in custody of Hegai, Esther also was taken into the king's palace and put in custody of Hegai, who had charge of the women. And the young woman pleased him and won his favor. And he quickly provided her with her cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen young women from the king's palace, and advanced her and her young women to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. The Bible introduces us to Mordecai here, and he's a Jew in the citadel of Susa. Who knows what kingdom he's living in here? Persia, thank you. So he's one of the people who was a Jew but was still over in headquarters pretty much of this kingdom of Persia. Whenever you are reading this paragraph and then you think about the rest of the book if you've read it before, I'll ask you a question. How are you picturing Mordecai? Are you picturing somebody like Glenn's age? Or my age? Or Caleb's age? What age man do you have in your mind when you're reading? There's no right or wrong here. What are you thinking when you're reading about Mordecai there?
I think older.
Older than who?
Older than her.
Okay, older than her. Most of the time, the person raising the other is going to be the older one, right? Okay. Carl's narrowed it down that far. He's older than Esther, in all likelihood. What? The daughter, she's the daughter of his uncle. So he wasn't super old. Let's think for a moment. Who has a cousin that's a whole lot older than you, or one that's a whole lot younger than you? Years and years. You do, Jason? What's the spread?
20 years.
20 years. Trace, did I see you raising your hand? No. Not that big a spread. Does anybody have a bigger spread between your age and a cousin older or younger than 20 years?
25.
25, says Harold. Okay. Anybody else? How are you picturing Mordecai? How old is he? 40s? That's your picture? Okay. Because of how things are in our family here the last few years, I could picture it a lot more like Caleb's age. Because Caleb and Bethany, the last few years, have been raising this girl in their home before son was born to them. But how much older are you than Wendy? He's 8 years older than this girl that he's raising. Can you imagine doing that? So it's very realistic that that could be happening with Mordecai, especially if that's the right translation, if the link between these two is that they are cousins. Now, what do you think about a man who would take on that responsibility, especially if he's that age? Just from the beginning, what are you thinking about that guy for doing that? Are you favorably disposed to hear more about a man who would stand up and take that kind of responsibility? I sure am. So that's Mordecai. He's in this story because of this link to Esther, and we'll get to more about who Esther was and all this, but we're going to focus on Mordecai. Now, there was a time when I wasn't thinking real carefully or looking at things real closely, thinking Mordecai was one of the people who had been brought in exile to where he is now from Judah. But that's probably not the case, because the last of the exiles were brought in 586 BC. Well, now, historically, we're in the 400s. So do you think Mordecai was a 100-something-year-old cousin of young Esther? No, not at all. Not at all. So if we don't know our history, we kind of get a very skewed picture of what his age would be here. But that's what he's doing. He's watching out for this young woman, trying to finish her raising, and whenever she's been taken into an environment that she never imagined, every day, it says in verse 11, he walked in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. We're going to come back to that situation that she's in just a moment. Let's skip down to verses 19 to 23 in chapter 2. Now, when the virgins were gathered together the second time, that's the group of women that Esther's among now, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Now, you might be reading along, reading a different name than I was through there. I was reading Ahasuerus. Your Bible might say Xerxes. It's talking about the same guy either way. He's known as Xerxes, the first we would call him now in secular history. The Bible's name for him is Ahasuerus. Well, what do you know about that guy? King Ahasuerus, King Xerxes. If you've studied before, what do you know about him? Just from this book, in portions that we didn't read, we just skipped right over. He was consumed with his greatness. Josh has read in chapter 1 before. What else do you know about him? He made quick and impulsive decisions. What was one that's recorded in chapter 1? Those of you who've studied it before. What did he do? So his wife, his queen, he's having this party in honor of his greatness. Everybody who's anybody is there, and he decides we would really ramp this party up if we paraded my beautiful wife out in front of everybody. But she threw a wrench into that plan, didn't she? How so? She said, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. And for that, what did he decide? You're not the queen anymore. I'll just get me another one. And so that's when Esther was gathered up, along with all the other most beautiful young women in the kingdom, and they're put into the harem of the king, and they're going to be, one of them is going to be the new queen, Miss Persia. Okay? Now, just knowing that much, maybe you know more from study about Ahasuerus or Xerxes. Would you have been quick to do what Mordecai did for him? You're a Jew. You're not Persian. This is not where your people are from. You're probably not really glad to be here, but you're not one of the people who'd ever chosen to travel 900 miles to go back to the homeland. So you're in Persia, a Jew, and this kind of guy is the king. Now, to get us back up to speed, what we just read is that Mordecai, the Jew, had heard a plot being made by two of the king's men. What do they want to do? They want to lay hands on the king. That means they've got an assassination plot. And Mordecai, through Esther, exposes it. Now, what do you think about Mordecai for doing that?
Maybe he was scared to death who was next in line.
Maybe he was scared to death who was next in line. Could we get an even worse king than we've already got? He's a law-abiding citizen, ain't he?
Well, Esther's right there in the midst of all this political evolution here. She's working her way up the ladder, possibly. This might be a good feather in her cap, a good resume item, you know?
Perhaps he could be thinking that. Carl?
If I was Esther's uncle, I'd be concerned about Esther in that situation.
You would what?
If I was Esther's uncle, I would be concerned that this plot might overrun and she get killed.
Okay, so that's Esther related as well, but two different possibilities are suggested. Carl then said, what would happen to Esther in all of this? Maybe he has that in mind. Is it possible, Mordecai was just a fly on the wall in all of this. Nobody knew Mordecai had heard that. Did he have a responsibility to expose the plot? Liam's quick to say, yeah, he had a responsibility to expose the plot. And I kind of think, I see you doing that too, Eli? Why does he have a responsibility to tell something that he overheard? He's not in the middle of it, really.
It's pretty simple as the recognition that there's value in human life that should be preserved in any given situation that you can't do.
Eli's talking about the value of human life.
Murder's not just bad when it happens to good people. It's wrong when it happens.
Murder's not just bad when it happens to good people, Matt said. And we're seeing somebody, like John said a while ago, who's a law-abiding citizen. He has respect for government. Whoever's there, he does not disdain governing authorities, whoever they are. Now, there's a lesson for us. But before we read further, let's think about the contrast of these two men that are most prominent in the story so far, King Ahasuerus and Mordecai, and what they think about women. What are women for? What are women for? What? Being fruitful and multiplying, he said. Just like men in Genesis chapter 1, right? Made in the image of God, just like men in Genesis chapter 1. Just like a man, a woman is made for the glory of God. We're made in His image, and we're made to reflect His glory, to enjoy life with Him, life that He gave us, and to make it what He wants it to be. They're not inferior. Mordecai had concern for his cousin. What would have happened to her if somebody like Mordecai hadn't stepped up when her parents died? But then on the other hand, you've got King Ahasuerus. And to him, what are women for? From all you can read in the story so far, to him, what are women for?
Pleasure.
They're for my pleasure. They're for whatever I want to do with them, what I could get out of them. So he's got a whole harem of them right now. Esther's been added to the collection, but one of them is going to become queen. We need to think for a little while about being more like Mordecai whenever we think about the women in our lives and all women. Let's read more of the story. Chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And when they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. Now here a man enters the story who really puts King Ahasuerus into perspective. Maybe what Glenn was talking about a while ago, what if somebody like Haman were to become king? But why do you think Mordecai wouldn't do what everyone else was doing toward Haman and that the king had commanded? Why wouldn't Haman do that? Does the Bible tell us here? Why wouldn't Haman bow down and pay homage, Mordecai, why wouldn't he bow down and pay homage to Haman?
Religious belief.
Religious belief?
He's a Jew. It's against their one of the 10 Commandments.
A Jew what?
I said it's one of the commandments.
One of the commandments.
Not to bow down to anyone else.
Okay. Whenever you start reading the commandments in Exodus chapter 20, in verse 3, you get the first ones. You shall have no other gods before me. And then the second commandment is you don't make carved images, you don't make idols and bow down to them. Do you get out of those two commandments, you don't bow down to someone like Haman?
It was probably more to do with their heritage,
More to do with heritage, you think?
who his descendants were.
Okay. Somebody else have something to put in there about why he didn't bow down? And was it a matter of right or wrong?
I think it was a lot like the character Daniel and his friends. They wouldn't do it.
All right. He had some principles like Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego who just weren't going to do in this foreign culture what they were called upon to do if it violated their convictions. Now, the only clue we get in here that's stated outright is he had told some of the other people he was a Jew. It was because he was a Jew. And that makes us extrapolate back to those kinds of things that we were just talking about. But he wasn't going to do it. Think about for a moment, too, we haven't talked about biblical names. Most of the time they mean something. Mordecai is not a Jewish name. It's probably not the name that was on his birth certificate. They gave him a name, a new name, in Persia. Just like when Babylon first grabbed all these people in Judah and brought them into exile, Daniel got renamed. Anybody remember the name that was given to him? Belteshazzar, which would give honor to one of their local gods. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't get those names from their parents. Their real names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And all three of those names honor the Lord. They got new names that were given to them to honor local false deities. It looks like that happened to Mordecai at some point, because the basis of his name is Marduk, who was a local false god there. Hey, let's get to know each other better for just a minute here. How many of us are known here by the name that our parents gave us? It's on our birth certificate. That's what it says. Raise your hand if the name we call you is the name on your birth certificate. Most of us. How many of us are not known here by the name that's on our birth certificate? Okay? My real name's Daniel, not Danny, but my parents called me Danny from the beginning. What's your real name? That was my guess, Matthew. Who else raised their hand on that? Josh?
I'm Joshua on my birth certificate.
Okay. Jason, what's yours? That's not short for something. Jasonovich or something? No. What?
My last name.
Oh, your last name is not what's on your birth certificate. I see. Who was another? Who was somebody else that raised? Sam?
Sam.
Okay, short. Who, Tony? Anthony. Does anybody here, do we call you a name that it's not some version of what's on your birth certificate? Some of us are shortened. Eric Liam. Does it bother you if we start calling you Eric? It'll bother him. Don't do that. He's bigger than me, so I'm not going to do it. Mordecai. Every day he had to hear people call him Mordecai. And he went with that, but it sounds like maybe that's just about enough. I'm a Jew, and I want to be faithful to God, so he's not willing to bow down whenever Haman comes walking by, even when everybody else is doing it. So this man named Haman, what do you think about him? I don't know what's going on that made the king make Haman number 2 in the kingdom. There's something going on between them, right? But Haman sure was glad to be there. He was glad to have that spot. He wanted everybody to acknowledge that he belonged there, but it doesn't look like Mordecai's doing it. Haman reacts angrily, but it's not enough just to be mad at Mordecai. What's starting to take shape in his mind besides just, I'm going to get that Mordecai? I'm going to get all Mordecai's people. I'm going to get all the Jews. The last thing we read in verse 6 is that he sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. And so he starts working on that plan. And he gets the king to sign off on one day, we're going to kill all of Mordecai's people. In one day, we're going to exterminate this whole race. Let's move ahead to chapter 4. Beginning in verse 1, it says, when Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes and went out into the midst of the city, and he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes. It seems like every Sunday night we're finding somebody putting on sackcloth and sitting in ashes. There were people who went through some hard things when we open our Bibles and meet them in the Old Testament, but Mordecai is doing that, and in public he's crying out with a loud and bitter cry. Do grown men cry? What do grown men cry about? Does the Bible say grown men don't cry? Have we lived in a time of machismo that says grown men don't cry? Especially in front of people, huh? Too much John Wayne.
I would say if Jesus wept, it's probably okay for us to weep.
End of class right there. That was so wise. Gary said if Jesus wept, it's okay for us to. Yeah, but we have been through a time in our culture where, as John said, too much John Wayne in us. What does it mean to be a man? Well, cry is one of the things that you don't do, but Mordecai didn't think so. When you understand the gravity of certain situations, you'll cry and even do so in public. Now, we didn't really talk about what are the details of this plan that Haman was able to get the king to sign off on, but wherever people are in the kingdom, and it's vast, and the decree they've given it enough time to spread the word to everybody. On this one certain date on the calendar, if you've got a neighbor who's a Jew, kill your neighbor. They're just going to use everybody in the kingdom to kill all the Jews in the kingdom. What a time that would have been. So Mordecai has heard about that. Let's see what Esther hears about it now. Verse 4 of chapter 4. When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Maybe she thought grown men don't cry. Verse 5, then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in the front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her, and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there's but one law, to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he may live. But as for me, I've not been called to come in to the king these 30 days. Now, think about that in Esther's situation again for a moment. Again, what does this man, the king, think about women? Well, this one's his wife now. But how long has it been since she was in his presence there at the end? 30 days. It's been a month since she'd even got to see the man who made her his queen. So women serve a purpose in his life, but at this point, it wasn't meant for her to be a close companion to him or anything like that. And she's almost there on equal ground with everybody else. What a custom it was. You don't get an audience with the king unless he invites you. She finds herself in this position, and Mordecai's wanting her to march on in. She's between a rock and a hard place, isn't she? Grave danger that she's in. So what's she going to do? Verse 12, and they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you'll escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you've come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king. though it's against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. So Mordecai wants her to know he's sure this matter is going to be taken care of for us, whether you do it or not. But you ought to get in there and do it. Now, here's this point in the Bible that helps us to remember. Some of you know what makes the book of Esther unique from all the other books of the Bible. Whose name is never mentioned in this whole book? God. Does that surprise you? There's a book in the Bible that doesn't have the name of God in it. But from Mordecai, we're finding out that he thinks the way he does and he acts the way he does because of a deep trust in God. As some people have said, God's name's not anywhere in the book, but his fingerprints are all over it. All over the book, all over the story. So get in there, Esther, and do what you're in a position to do. Who knows but that you've arose to this position in this kingdom for such a time as this, for just this. And so she did. And what did she say that indicates she understands the gravity of this situation?
She was going to go in and says, if I perish, I perish.
If I don't survive this, then okay. I understand, Mordecai. I have to do it. Let's pause for a moment and do something practical here. So, Esther wouldn't have ever gotten in there and done that and intervened, and she's going to in the next couple of chapters, if Mordecai hadn't encouraged her, if Mordecai hadn't urged her. Now, in a little while, I'm going to ask for some specific names, and maybe you give us a specific example, but who do you know? Who in your life is a Mordecai who's good at spurring you to do good, to do right, to do better, or to do more than you were otherwise going to do? You know, the Bible tells us to be that way for each other. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24, to consider one another, to stir one another up to love and good deeds. Would you out somebody here right in front of us? I've got somebody in my life who does that or who has ever done that. Challenge me to be more, to do more. John?
My dad had pushed me past my comfort zone in the past to do things I wouldn't have done.
If you couldn't hear John, he said, my dad, that guy back there, has pushed him to do things that were not in his comfort zone. Would you care to give some example of something like that? Or you just know that's always the way it is?
Well, leading songs is something he wanted me to do.
Doing what?
Leading songs is something Mom and Dad pushed me to do.
Oh, yes?
I didn't want to do it. Preaching more than I would have.
John never wanted to be a song leader, he said, but Mom and Dad pushed him to do that. You can do that, and we all know that he can. Now, right? But it looks like he wouldn't have if it wasn't for his dad back there. And he preached more than he would have, too. It can be something like that. It can be something of another nature. Who's somebody in your life who has pushed you to do good, to do better, to do more, and you're thankful for him?
I had three in my life, John, Don, and Rick.
Glenn said he's had John, Don, and Rick Hyder. Name one thing that any of them have ever pushed you further to do, spurred you to do.
I never was one to want to speak in public. They got me teaching, a lot of different things.
He never, ever wanted to speak in public, but they got him to teaching and doing other things, and we're glad for that. Somebody else. Who's somebody who has spurred you to do right, to do more, to do better? Carl. I'm going to do Carl, and then I'm going to demand of you 2 more examples. See, I'm somebody right now who's doing that. No. Carl, and then 2 more.
When she was alive, my sister,
Your sister.
she had a way of saying things to me that made me think that I'd be going down the wrong pathway or I could be better at what I was doing. So she was always my sounding board and helping me decisions out there.
I'm glad you had her. 2 more guys. Tell us about somebody. Pete? Pam?
Being that one that said, hey, you can do this, you should do this, why don't we do that? It was always we, but it was me. In a lot of cases. So, it's always been about, setting the right example, doing the right things, doing more.
We're glad God gave you a wife like that. 1 more. Matt?
My father.
Your father.
When I was older, teenager in high school, long day at school and football practice. We had a new family that moved to town, and he wanted us to go help move them. I was already very exhausted. I didn't really want to go, but he said, no, you need to go. Because he said, you never know, somebody might not show up. It ended up just being me and my brother and my dad. Nobody would have been there to help. Lectured on the way home. He said, see, that's exactly why. Because he said, somebody has to always do something because not everybody will.
So if you couldn't hear him, he spoke about a really specific instance when his dad told him and his brother, we're going to go do this. We're going to help somebody move in. And Matt was already exhausted from things he had done that day, but his dad said, let's go. And they were the only people who showed up to help. Did I see you wanting to raise your hand? I don't want to shut you. Your dad. What's your dad ever gotten you to do that you probably wouldn't have done? All right. Same kind of things like we're hearing from some other guys about what you're doing in the work of the church. We're really thankful. So two lessons so far that I especially want us to make sure we take home. And we're going to quit at 6 o'clock, so we've got a little bit more to do. But let's be like Mordecai. Let's treat women right. Let's be compassionate toward them and helpful and leaders for them. And then let's be the people who spur other people on to love and good works like the New Testament teaches us. Mordecai is a really good example of that. Let's keep reading some more. Chapter 5, let's move to verse 9. Esther, in the meantime, has planned this banquet. After Mordecai has told her what's going on and you've got to do something, she plans a banquet where only the king and Haman are going to be present. Haman thinks, she's planning a banquet and just the king and me. I have arrived. I'm really somebody. So they went in verse 9, and Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. You think about this man Haman. He's left the banquet just so full of himself, best day ever, and it could change just like that. When he walks out, and there's Mordecai again, sticking out like a sore thumb. He looks like Andy standing up with everybody else bowing down. Now, why do you think Mordecai, when he sees what this has already caused, why is he still keeping the same track? Why is he still doing the same thing? He's staying loyal to God, Corbin says. Right and wrong hasn't changed just because it looks like I'm not getting the very best thing in this life for it.
He's showing a trust in God, that God's in control and will take care of it all.
It's showing that God's in control. He trusts that. Verse 10, nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, and he sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. Then Haman said, even Queen Esther, let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared, and tomorrow also I'm invited by her together with the king. Yet all this is worth nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. As we pause for just a minute, what will an intense anger at another person do to you? How will that affect you? We see an example of it here. He can't think about anything. Everything else in life seems good. But as long as Mordecai is around, it can't be good. He feels that way. In verse 14, then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. So this is the kind of people that Haman surrounded himself with. People who will support him in having that kind of attitude, that kind of animosity toward other people. He sure needed somebody like a Mordecai in his life, more than the people that he had in his life. As we keep going, here's chapter 6, verses 1 through 11. On that night, the king could not sleep. He gave orders to bring the book of memorable deeds, the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written how Mordecai had told about Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold and who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The king's young men who attended him said, nothing's been done for him. And the king said, who's in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's young men told him, Haman is there, standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? Haman said to himself, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king delights to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and the horse that the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Haman thinks he's just gotten to plan the best day of his life. Here's what the king's going to do for me. Verse 10, then the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing that you have mentioned. And so that's just what happened. And one of the most ironic things ever to happen in all of any book that you will ever read. And the king wasn't in yet on Mordecai's the one that Haman wants to kill. The providence of God runs all through this book. You see a heading, probably heading into the next chapter. Esther revealed Haman's plot to the king, with Haman standing right there in front of the king. And it ends up in verses 7 through 10 that Haman is hung on the very gallows that he had built for Mordecai. So that solves that much of the problem. That edict is still out there that on this certain day, everybody's supposed to kill a Jew, and another Jew, and another Jew, until they're all gone. And the way things worked back there, once an edict had been signed, once the king had put his stamp on it, there wasn't any changing it. So Esther and Mordecai come up with a plan. Let's make another law alongside that. Jews get to defend themselves that day. And the king let these two just write it up just the way they wanted it. And that's what they did. And on chapter 9, verse 1, it says, "Now in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 30th day of the same, when the king's command and edict were about to be carried out, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain the mastery over them, the reverse occurred. The Jews gained mastery over those who hated them." Never a bigger turnaround in history, in Scripture, in something that happened that way. Well, they decided this is a day of celebration. This is going to be a day of celebration every year. We're going to make a holiday out of this. They called it Purim. And Mordecai wrote up the instructions for that. And that continued to be a holiday for all of them. Here's the way the book ends. "King Ahasuerus imposed tax on the land and on the coastlands of the sea, and all the acts of his power and might, and the full account of the high honor of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Ahasuerus, and he was great among the Jews and popular with the multitude of his brothers, for he sought the welfare of his people and spoke peace to all his people." You never would have seen that being the outcome of all this at the beginning of this book. But Mordecai was a man who was faithful to God, and that paid dividends in many ways in this life. That's not the way it always turns out, but it did in this case. And I think one last thing, besides what Mordecai teaches us about how to treat women in contrast to the other men that are a part of the story, how Mordecai teaches us to be that person who spurs other people to love and good works. I think you see by the end of this story a difference in this king, Ahasuerus, thanks to the influence of Mordecai and Esther in all of this. These are the people you can trust. These are the people who've got the welfare of everybody in mind. And he wanted Mordecai to be his right-hand man then. He was number 2 in all the kingdom then. There's a lot more to the story. We're going to do 2 more things. We're going to sing a song together, and then we're going to have a prayer that I think Liam's the one that's supposed to lead. Does anybody want to tell or ask something else about that story? We had to leave out a whole lot of things, but what about that? What about Mordecai or anybody else in it that hadn't been told?
Why did he hate the Jews so?
Why was Haman Hitler before Hitler? Why did he hate the Jews so? Do you have an idea about that, Lynn?
It's his heritage. He was a Mede. But the Jews killed all of them going into the promised land. But his descendants was some that survived.
So Lynn says perhaps that's in his heritage. Oh, my people have always hated Jews. So you know what? I hate Jews. Do we have to be stuck with the heritage that we're given? Can we rise above things that haven't been right in our environments? We're not stuck. Anybody else have something on Mordecai or anything in that true story? All right. Here's the song we're going to sing, and at least some of you know it. The rest of you catch on real fast. It's number 553, "Rise Up, O Men of God." Let's stand up literally to sing all 4 verses, and then I will give Liam this microphone to lead our prayer.